Hi, can everybody hear me? Yes, good.
Yes.
So, good afternoon, good morning, good evening to you all. I know we've got people joining from around the globe there this afternoon, so that's fantastic. Welcome to today's webinar, Demystifying the Costs of Azure Virtual Desktops. We're going to start pretty much straight away. I know that many people on the call today have got back-to-back diaries, so we're scheduled for the hour. Let's jump straight in. Vadim, if you can just move that slide for me. Thank you. So thank you for joining us today. There's a really good turnout on this call. We've obviously struck a chord in terms of the technologies that we're going to be discussing today. Just a couple of quick introductions. My name is Russell Henderson. I'm the technical director here at Trustack, and we're lucky enough to be joined today by Vadim, founder and CEO of Nerdio.
Hi everyone, great to meet you.
So we're hosting this webinar today jointly. I expect many of you will already know of Nerdio, but I do suspect that many of you won't have heard of Trustack. We're a cloud and security focused MSP and Nerdio Gold partner based in the north of the UK. We focus on adding value and efficiency to our clients by keeping them on the front foot in terms of technology advancements. We constantly look over the horizon at new technologies, and we test and assess many, and we adopt the best that we can find that will prove and provide significant benefits and advantages to our clients. We work throughout the UK and further afield, to be fair, but we work in sectors such as manufacturing, insurance, media, offshore, housing, to name a few. Nerdio is one of those new technologies that we have seen deliver rapid cost and efficiency savings for our customers to date, allowing them to traverse far more easily into the Azure AVD space. Nadeem, could you move that slide on, please? So I just thought I'd spend a minute or two setting the go back one for me there, please, Nadeem. I just thought I'd spend 1, maybe 2 minutes just setting out the landscape as we see it, what it was previously and what it is today in terms of scale, cost, and time. So over the last couple of years, the options, the capabilities, the license models, and costs of delivering virtual desktop solutions have changed substantially. I'm guessing a number of you on this session today will either be running maybe VMware Horizon or Citrix VDI solutions, and you've probably been using that technology for a number of years. Some of you may have already migrated over to something like AVD. Trustack's background comes from a long history of delivering VMware Horizon solutions for many clients across many sectors, both on-prem and leveraging public cloud platforms. We have extensive experience in the virtual desktop technology space. And whilst these solution choices were solid at the time, do they remain the most stable, the most secure, and the most cost-effective way of delivering a robust virtual desktop experience for your user base? Can they meet the efficiencies and the security requirements that are needed in today's cyber landscape? In terms of scale, it could be challenging. It could be a challenge to scale internal infrastructure. Cost-wise, it was expensive to do so, and to scale it internally and on cloud solutions and services required extensive administration, time, and ongoing management. So where do we see the landscape today? Well, as we see it here at Trustack, until recently, the cost and platform capability made the business case for AVD challenging for many. The time is right now, technically, financially, and from a functionality perspective, to leverage the Azure public cloud or Windows 365 to deliver your virtual desktop experiences. In terms of fiscal cost savings, when compared to using native Azure AVD management, we see cost reductions north of 50% when using Nerdio NME for our clients. You'll hear more regarding how this is achieved during this webinar from Vadim. Those facing a technology platform refresh or a substantial price increase at license renewal time could now avoid the CapEx costs of that refresh and benefit from a significant increase in your cybersecurity posture. Improving general flexibility whilst potentially mitigating any price increases, or even better, you could potentially reduce your current OpEx costs using this technology. Those already using AVD and leveraging native AVD controls will simply benefit from reduced operational costs and reduced administration times. In addition to the financial savings, Nerdio greatly enhances the ease of administrative management surrounding AVD, reducing administrative skill set onboarding time for internal teams, and thanks to extensive automation capabilities not natively available within the Azure platform, reduces the administrative overheads of AVD solutions significantly. In terms of scale today, using AVD and Nerdio, it's an automated policy-driven action. In terms of costs for AVD, this can be reduced drastically and managed on an ongoing basis. And regarding admin time, you can do more with the same resources in the team, but with a lot less repetitive admin tasks to handle manually. So with all that said, and from our side of things, I'd just like to take a minute to run you through a Trustack client journey. Just a quick example of a real world saving that one of our clients has made. So historically, this client was a VMware Horizon customer, circa 400 concurrent users. They had an extensive internal application stack with significant bespoke integrations, running towards the end on 7-ish hosts with SSD, quality storage, and thin client devices. And they had a separate disaster recovery solution on a smaller scale to take care of any unforeseen events. So this customer, they're a very forward-looking company. They're often early adopters of new technologies. They were actually on VMware View as it was from pretty much the first release, and it was Trustack ourselves who implemented this solution for the customer back in maybe 2010, 2011, something like that. So they've had roughly 10 to 12 years life cycle out of that solution, during which time they've been through multiple hardware refreshes and countless software version upgrades, etc. More recently, that customer took themselves into a self-discovery and lightweight trial of AVD, small scale initial footprint and application stack testing, but with a view to growing it into a limited use case within the business, but with a full view of a much bigger plan of having 600 concurrent users on that platform. So they found the real use case for AVD for their business. Over the last 3 to 4 years, they have naturally transitioned into a more SaaS consumption-based organization. A lot of the vendors repackaged their applications and delivered them as a SaaS service. So they've gone through a natural transition over the last 3 to 4 years. They liked what they saw from AVD, but their feedback to us was it's pricey, but the benefits warrant the price point. And they'd already gotten to grips with managing the native tooling within AVD and the multiple interfaces. And at this point in time, I was having a conversation with them about maybe 2 other technologies, 2 security technologies, and they just give me this update on where they were on this project. So I introduced them to the concept of Nerdio at that point in time, just give them an idea of what it could potentially do for them at their scale. And we offered them a free 2-week trial of Nerdio, just an overlay for the tool for them to see the benefits for themselves. So where's that customer today? Well, they're pretty much running full user load at this point in time. They have AVD and they have it more or less configured natively as it was, but the full Nerdio tool set is now wrapped around it. So they're benefiting from pretty much a 68% OpEx cost reduction at full user load. Those efficiencies stem from the automation and the control Nerdio brings, which Vadim will cover shortly, and an estimate of 30 to 40% reduction in admin team time being spent administering the platform. So that was all achieved within pretty much a 2-week window of these guys starting to test Nerdio, albeit they'd already been on a journey and had an infrastructure set up in AVD. So with that, I'll pass you over to Vadim to take you through in detail Nerdio as a technology and how it can deliver these benefits for you.
Thank you, Russell. Really appreciate the introduction and a great background, and really appreciate the partnership that Nerdio and Trustack have in delivering these types of results for our joint customers. Really kind of impressive results with your example here. What I'd like to do during today's webinar is to give the audience kind of a high-level introduction to what Nerdio is, and then really dig into the cost aspects of AVD and what Nerdio brings to the table in terms of cost optimization, what are the possible cost reduction strategies, and then we'll actually do a demo and see how all of this works and hopefully do a quick deployment of an auto-scale configured AVD environment. So everyone on the call or on the webinar can see how this actually works in practice. I'm going to once in a while glance back in the Teams chat. So if you have any questions that come up, feel free to type those into the chat, and I'll pause at certain points and address those as they come up. So let's start out by talking about Nerdio's experience with AVD. So Nerdio is a Microsoft ISV. We're a Microsoft independent software vendor, and we've been working with Microsoft engineering since about 2018 on the product that eventually became WVD, which then ultimately got renamed to AVD, or Azure Virtual Desktop. So we've been really working with Microsoft closely as this product and service was being developed and launched. When the product launched in 2019, we were a day one launch partner and supported AVD or WVD at the time with a graphical user interface, and have been fortunate since then to work with over 10,000 customer deployments through our great partners like Trustack. We have millions of users under management in AVD that are using Nerdio Manager for Enterprise and Nerdio Manager for MSP solutions to manage those environments. And we're seeing hundreds of new deployments of new customer environments each and every month. And all of this gives us a very wide exposure to what's out there, what are the pain points around desktop virtualization in the Azure cloud, and allows us to quickly take our customer and partner feedback and turn it into valuable functionality inside of our products, which we update and do a new release pretty much on a monthly basis to give this new functionality to our customers. Starting at a very high level to understand what value Nerdio provides to our customers and what it is, the Nerdio Manager for Enterprise, which is the focus of today's webinar, is one of our two core products. We have Nerdio Manager for Enterprise and Nerdio Manager for MSP. And Nerdio Manager for Enterprise is a modern, unified management platform for both virtual desktop as a service components, the virtual desktop as a service endpoints, as well as physical endpoints, which is an area that we are extending our functionality into now as well. The product aims to achieve three high-level objectives. Number one, it helps accelerate deployments of an AVD environment from weeks and months down to hours and days. We have customers that have successfully deployed their AVD environments in less than 90 minutes, kind of start to finish, having a fully working AVD session that users can start logging into. And accelerating deployments is definitely one of our core value propositions. The second one, which is really the focus of today's discussion, is our ability to help customers minimize costs. And we're going to get into this in a lot more detail. So I'll skip the detail for now. And then the third value proposition is reducing complexity. AVD is a cloud service, which is not only complex because it runs in Azure, which is a public cloud infrastructure, but also because it's VDI. And there's just a lot of knobs and dials that can be turned, lots of configuration options, and it tends to get fairly complex, especially for those without many years of in-depth VDI experience and many years of cloud experience. So Nerdio Manager makes the entire process of deploying and managing AVD environments much simpler and much more automated. The technologies that we sit on top of are Azure Virtual Desktop. Obviously, that is the focus of our discussion today, but we also work with Windows 365 cloud PCs. We extend into Azure Stack HCI, which is a way to run AVD in on-premises deployments, as well as also Microsoft Intune, which allows our customers to manage all of their DAS and physical endpoints in the same management UI. Let's drill in to the Azure Virtual Desktop component of Nerdio Manager for Enterprise. So if you think about Azure Virtual Desktop and its technology stack, it's a set of services provided by Microsoft that really has these four silos of functionality to it. There is the client application, which Microsoft creates for each and every modern operating system that's out there, right? Your Windows and Linux and a web browser and Mac and iOS, etc. Every one of those has an RD client app, remote desktop client app, that can be installed and used to connect to the virtual desktop by your end users. There is a new version of Windows 10, now Windows 11, that launched as part of WVD AVD product back in 2019. And that is what's known as a Windows 10, Windows 11 multi-session OS, multi-session operating system, which allows you to take a single VM and allow multiple users to connect to it at the same time and have each session be isolated and secure, which really allows you to bring down the unit cost of infrastructure needed to support a single user session. Previously, this was only possible with server class operating system, but not with desktop operating system. And that was one of the major innovations of AVD, is taking the Windows desktop OS and allowing multi-session use in that scenario. The third pillar is the admin experience of AVD. When AVD launched in 2019, it was all command line and PowerShell driven. There was no UI that came with it. But eventually, Microsoft launched a management experience through the Azure portal, where a lot of activities, kind of standard deployment and management tasks, can be done in the Azure portal. And finally, there is a set of gateway, broker, diagnostics, logging services that are hosted and supported by Microsoft on behalf of all the AVD customers. All the types of things that VDI administrators previously had to manage on their own. So if you've worked with RDS or with Citrix or with VMware, there was a whole set of infrastructure services that were needed to take a user session and land it on the proper session host VM to provide them their user desktop session. So that is what Azure Virtual Desktop looks like in terms of its subcomponents. Nerdio Manager is an Azure application that plugs into the admin experience of AVD and extends it with enterprise functionality that allows customers to benefit from easier, more automated, and much more cost-effective management of AVD. Nerdio Manager is not a hosted service. It's an Azure application that customers download and deploy from the Azure Marketplace directly into their Azure environment. It is not a control plane like some of the other virtual desktop products out there in the market that requires you to migrate into or out of it if you decide to ever not use it in the future. It's an overlay to the native Azure Virtual Desktop management. It's a management UI that sits on top of the native technologies and just basically turns the dial, so to speak, inside of the Microsoft environment through Graph API. The reason we chose to architect and develop the product in this way is because Microsoft has made a very significant commitment and is making very large and rapid investments into building out this desktop virtualization in Azure ecosystem. They're building lots of new functionality very, very rapidly. And we wanted to make sure that users and customers can take advantage of all the newest Microsoft functionality immediately as it's launched by Microsoft, as opposed to rewriting their functionality with a custom app for the end users, an agent that may need to run on the session host VM, maybe a different brokering and authentication and multi-factor solution. We don't do any of that. We allow Microsoft native services to handle everything from the end user's device up to their session host VM, and we provide the management overlay that helps administrators be more efficient and make the entire environment more cost-effective in Azure. The three pillars of value that Nerdio Manager provide, you can see up on the screen here. The first one on the left is all about cost reduction and optimization. As Russell mentioned, we save customers anywhere between 50 to 75% on average, and many times even more than that, relative to their unoptimized deployment of AVD natively, which is pretty significant savings if you think about it. And those are hard dollar or hard pound savings that drop down to the bottom line. This is not kind of hypothetical savings. This is actual savings on the Azure bill. In addition to the hard savings, there's also more of the soft savings in terms of improving IT admin efficiency, allowing lower skilled technicians and administrators and engineers to do much more complex tasks that otherwise would require someone with very unique skills, and just bringing down that learning curve significantly. The second area is all about automation and orchestration to help increase the reliability of an AVD environment. A typical example in this category would be something like image management. Image management in Azure is a very powerful and flexible capability, but it tends to get complex. Customers struggle to manage images, especially at scale, when they have lots of applications, lots of image versions. They want to patch them on a monthly basis. They want to test them. They want to roll them out with the ability to roll back if needed, if there's a problem. And doing it through Azure is certainly possible, but requires scripting and coding and a lot of complexity and skill. Nerdio has made a significant investment into image management, just as an example of this category, where we have a full life cycle image management built in a simple to use UI, fully automated for our customers, where you can go from creating an image, installing applications, deploying that image to your users, patching it automatically on a monthly basis, testing it before rolling it out in production, and then rolling it out in production, etc. Right? So that entire process can be fully automated with just a few clicks. We also provide customers with the ability to enable active DR for their AVD environment. So if one Azure region goes down, users can continue working uninterrupted out of a second region that they've defined in their AVD deployment. It takes care of their replication of their profile data, load balancing of the workloads and the VMs. So all of that is taken care of automatically by Nerdio Manager to ensure that there is, active DR in case of regional failure. Another example in this category would be our self-healing engine, which monitors proactively the health of all the session host VMs in the Azure environment and can automatically remediate any problems that it detects, whether it be rebooting a machine, reinstalling the agent, or even deleting and recreating a session host VM, all transparently in the background in an automated fashion. So instead of a user having to open a help desk ticket and needing an administrator to go in and start troubleshooting and then manually fixing problems, Nerdio Manager can detect the problem automatically, go through a recovery plan of various recovery steps and fix the problem without even having to get any administrators involved. And then the third category is all about simplifying management. So I already mentioned the deployment component, just accelerating and simplifying the initial deployment process, but then helping users with what we call unified management of all components that relate to AVD. So AVD is just one of Azure services, but it sits on top of lots of other Azure capabilities. Think about things like FSLogix and log analytics and applications and storage and all the other Azure components that together make up a fully functional AVD system. Nerdio Manager brings all of those pieces together into a single UI and allows management of everything in one place in a very simplified and automated way, as you will see during our demo in just a few minutes. And then finally, we also help customers with application management. This includes both application importing from other repositories they may have, the ability to test applications for their compatibility, the ability to deliver those applications to AVD host pools or individual desktops, and do so in automatically updating applications. So really the full end-to-end application management capabilities are built into the product as well. Let's drill in and talk about costs specifically, because that is the title of today's session. So having seen more than 10,000 AVD deployments, we've been able to analyze the data and see that the costs of a typical AVD environment in terms of Azure consumption comes from primarily three areas. Number one, not surprisingly, will be the compute cost of the virtual machines, of the VMs that are serving up the desktop sessions. Then you have the OS disks, the operating system disks that are attached to those VMs. And then you have the storage system that contains the FSLogix user profiles. And we'll talk about those in a little bit more detail in just a few minutes. So if you look at those top three areas of cost, they makes up more than 90% of the total cost of a typical AVD deployment. And that is where Nerdio Manager makes a lot of investment into optimizing those three areas, as we can see on this slide. So I know this looks like a very busy slide, but I want to use it as a sort of a high-level overview of the types of optimizations that Nerdio Manager brings to our customers in a fully automated fashion, and the type of impact those optimizations can have. So first of all, let's look at the assumptions used to create this model. So the assumptions are very common for a typical multi-session deployment. We're going to make the assumption here that we have 192 users, but this scales fully linearly if you go up from here. So all of these per user costs are going to remain exactly the same, whether you have 192 or 500 or 1,000 or any number of users above 192. We're going to assume that we are using what Microsoft calls a heavy user type. And a heavy user type means we're going to have a density of 2 users per virtual CPU, which is pretty common for a typical multi-session deployment. We're going to use a D8S V4, which is an 8-core, 32 gig RAM Intel VM available in pretty much every Azure region, which is the most common VM type we see used. We're going to use a P10, which is a 128 gigabyte premium SSD disk. And the reason we're going to use this premium SSD disk is because it's going to give our users the best performance, so their applications open quickly and they can get their work done in a productive manner. The FSLogix profile is going to be on average 20 gigabytes and is going to be stored in Azure Files Premium file share inside of Azure. We're going to assume that users are working 50 hours in a week per average, although this is, on the high side. Generally, this is closer to 35 to 40 hours from our data, but just to kind of be conservative with the numbers, we're going to assume 50 hours. And the pricing is based on list pricing from the South UK Azure region, although prices vary slightly from region to region. This is very representative. And you can see here that if you were to deploy this environment in an unoptimized fashion, you would pay about 21 to 22 pounds per user per month, which is, if you think about it, a pretty great starting price point if you take into account what's included. It's your entire infrastructure, it's the control plane, it's everything that AVD is included at less than 22 pounds per user per month. However, as you can see by looking down this list, we can do much, much better than that with Nerdio's optimization strategies. And this page includes 6 of the most common cost reduction strategies, which can be enabled fully automatically through the Nerdio Manager UI, as you'll see when we do the demo. And the first 3 of these 6 have to do with compute optimization, so optimizing the cost of the compute, which is the most expensive part, as you saw in the previous slide, of an AVD deployment. And then the second set of 3 has to do with storage optimization. So let's quickly run through these, and I will demonstrate and explain kind of what they are, how they work, and why I've chosen to put these on the list. Now, keep in mind, these 6 are just a sample. They're the most popular ones, but there are many others that Nerdio Manager can do to optimize costs even further, but you can see the impact of just the most popular 6. So the first one that has to do with compute optimization, we call VM power management. And as the name implies, it's the ability to detect when a VM should be powered on and when it should be powered off, depending on user behavior. So when users are logging in or prior to them logging in, those VMs should become available and users should be able to connect and work. But when those VMs aren't in use, they should be shut down, and that compute meter should stop spinning so you're not paying for it on the Azure bill. So that is power management and the most popular cost optimization strategy. The second compute optimization strategy has to do with something we call just-in-time provisioning. So if you are just doing power management, what that means is you're going to pre-provision or create in advance a group of VMs. In our example here, it's 12 session hosts to accommodate 192 users. And these 12 session hosts are going to exist and they're going to be shut on and off depending on the user behavior at any given time. What that leads to is 2 things. Number one, the operating system disks that are attached to those VMs are being billed for even when the VM is powered off. Because as long as the VM exists, even if it's in a stopped state, the OS disk that's attached to it is being charged because the VM exists and the disk exists as well. The just-in-time provisioning lets you accomplish two things. Number one, instead of just powering VMs on and off, it's able to actually create VMs as they're needed and automatically delete them when they're no longer needed. When they are deleted, not only do you stop paying for the compute costs of that VM, but the OS disk that was attached to it goes away as well. So you're saving on that cost. So that's kind of a benefit number one that's related to costs. Benefit number two has to do with configuration drift. What happens in an environment that you provision and you let it run for months and months and months, especially when you have power management, is that some hosts are going to start being different than others. For example, if a patch comes out on Tuesday, but a VM is powered off that month and the patch doesn't apply, and then it powers on the next day and the user logs into it, the users may start having different experience day to day because they're being landed on different virtual machines, and they may experience different kind of user environment. And that's obviously not good because the configuration of each of these VMs starts to drift over time. So what just-in-time provisioning in Nerdio Manager lets you accomplish is not only are you not paying for compute and storage when those VMs aren't in use, but you're also regenerating and recreating those VMs on a fairly regular basis. So they're always based on the same golden image, and there isn't any configuration drift that you need to be worried about. The third optimization when it comes to compute has to do with reservation. So Microsoft has this concept of reserved instances, and reserved instances allows you to prepay or commit to a certain amount of Azure capacity for a certain VM family in a specific Azure region in exchange for a discount. For instance, for a 1-year commitment, you get about a 40% discount, and for a 3-year commitment, you get about a 60% discount. The challenge is if you are going to commit to all of the VMs up front, well, then why are you doing any auto scaling? You've already committed and you're going to be paying for that capacity on a 24/7 basis. And VM power management and just-in-time auto scaling is actually more cost effective than reservations. However, reservations still have a place in an auto scaled AVD environment because some amount of capacity is being used even on a 24/7 basis. The challenge is because the usage pattern is kind of sporadic, it's difficult to know how many VMs, or more precisely, how many CPU cores need to be reserved to get the best cost-benefit analysis. And what Nerdio Manager does is it proactively analyzes historical autoscale behavior over the last 30, 60, and 90 days, and gives you a recommendation how many CPU cores of what type of VM in what Azure region to reserve to get even further savings on compute. Now let's shift gears into storage scaling or storage optimizations from a cost perspective. Optimization number 4 on the list is called OS Disk Autoscale or Operating System Disk Autoscale. Recall that we made an assumption that we want the best possible user performance, so therefore we're going to give users a premium SSD disk attached to their VM so they have the best performance. Now, the challenge is if users are working only 50 hours in a week, and the remainder of the time, 168 hours in a week, which means 118 hours of the week, which is the majority of the time, the large majority of the time, users aren't going to be logged in that machine, and that machine will be shut off and stopped. You're still paying for a premium SSD disk. So how do you address that inefficiency? Well, OS Disk Autoscale automatically converts a premium SSD disk when the VM is running to a standard HDD or spinning media, which is 75% less expensive than the premium SSD when the VM is stopped. So you get the best of both worlds. You have VMs when they're stopped using standard HDD, and when they're started back up, they're going to start using premium SSD. There is almost no conversion overhead or user impact. It takes between 1 and 2 seconds to perform the conversion from SSD to HDD, and you end up with the best cost profile and the best performance with no impact on the user. The next optimization is called OS Disk Shrinking. And if you notice, if you go to Azure Marketplace and you deploy a Windows 10 or Windows 11 VM from the marketplace, you'll notice that it's a 128 gigabyte disk. And if you log into that VM, you'll see that more than 90 gigabytes of that disk is actually free. So you're paying for lots of free space for each and every session host VM in your environment. So what operating system disk shrinking does is it can take that disk and reduce it in size from the default 128 to 64, and in some cases even 32 gigs, so that you're not paying for any extra white space or extra free space on that disk that's no longer needed. And then finally, the final optimization has to do with FSLogic's profile shrinking or profile compression. So FSLogix is a profile containerization product that Microsoft has purchased right before they launched WVD. And what it does is it takes the user's profile, which is stored typically in the C users folder, encapsulates it into a VHD virtual disk file, and stores that file on a shared file share. So no matter which VM the user logs into, that profile gets mounted at logon time for that user to use. Now, the challenge with these profiles is that they're thin provisioned, which means they will grow as users put more data into them. And corresponding to that, you're going to constantly have to increase your Azure Files quota or set it so high so you are not at risk of running out. And the challenge is that those files don't shrink unless something happens, unless you actually go and compress them. So there's a lot of white space inside of them. And what Nerdio Manager can help you do is on a monthly basis or a weekly basis, go through all of the VHD files, remove any white space from inside of those files, and reduce the file size. And then most importantly, go into your Azure FSLogix storage account, like Azure Files Premium, and reduce the size of the quota to reflect the new reduction in consumption of space, because you're actually paying for the quota that you set, regardless of how much consumption you're actually doing. And as you can see, the impact can be 50% or more in most cases. So if we take all of these components together, we go down from a cost per user of $21.39 down to less than £4 per user per month, which is a whopping 83% reduction in an environment that implements all 6 of these cost reduction strategies. And the greatest thing about this is that all of these optimizations happen transparently to the user. It doesn't impact the user in any way. They don't know that any of this is going on in the background. They can continue running and being productive while the organization can save a tremendous amount on Azure consumption. Now, one other thing to mention on costs before we jump into our demo is that it's great to be able to proactively predict, kind of on a pro forma basis, what the cost per user may be. But what's really important in many environments is being able to measure what the costs actually are, right? And measuring where your total Azure costs are is not hard. First of all, you get a bill from Microsoft. And second of all, you can go into Azure Cost Management and look up that data at any time. The challenge is being able to, analyze that data and determine, how much am I paying for compute? How much am I paying for storage? What am I paying for networking? Is non-trivial, but doable. But what's really not doable without something like Nerdio Manager is the ability to attribute a proportion or portion of the cost to each individual user. Why is this important? Because you may have departments or cost centers in your organization that you want to charge back for their fair consumption of the Azure resources. And this is where Nerdio's user cost attribution reporting comes in. We're able to take your total Azure costs, correlate it with where each user logged in, what host they used, how much bandwidth, how long they were logged in, on what day, and almost perfectly attribute the cost of the entire Azure environment to an individual user. You can then take that data, you can group the users and figure out department costs, and very easily implement chargeback models for your organization. So what I'd like to do now, before I jump into the demo, let me just quickly peek at the chat and see if there are any questions there. I do not see any questions. So if you have any, please don't hesitate to just type them in. If not, I'm going to jump into the demo and actually show you what this looks like in practice. So What you can see open on the screen here is Nerdio Manager for Enterprise, right? As I mentioned, on the left side, you see all the various areas of Azure that Nerdio Manager brings together in a single unified management experience. So what we'll do in our session today during the demo is we will create an end-to-end environment of virtual desktops and maybe even be able to log in by the end of it. Maybe not. I'm not sure we'll have enough minutes left here, but let me start and show you what this looks like. So we'll start out on the AVD Workspaces page, which is where you see Workspaces, which is a way to group your session hosts and host pools into a single workspace. It could be obviously more than one. So I'm going to do this. Let's see, WS1. I'm going to select this to be in the North Central US next to me here. So we're going to create this workspace. And as I mentioned, Nerdio Manager is a native extension of AVD. So all the work that we're doing in the Nerdio Manager, if you were to open up the Azure portal, you would see all of these resources come alive or appear there as well, because these are all native Azure resources. Here's our new workspace. We're going to open it up. Here you'll see we now have several options for creating host pools. We can create hybrid host pools, which are the ones that are running on premises using Azure Stack HCI. We can create static host pools, which are ones that are kind of native to AVD, that are basically static collections of host VMs that administrators can add VMs to or remove VMs from, but there is not a lot of automation involved with static host pools. And then dynamic host pools is Nerdio extending the static host pool concept with golden image and auto scaling, and that's what we're going to create right now. So I'm going to create a new dynamic host pool. We're going to say Trustack host pool 1, and then we're going to choose a desktop experience. There's 4 types of desktop experiences that we can select from. We can do a multi-user or multi-session pooled desktop, probably the most popular way to deploy AVD. We can do a remote app. So instead of publishing an entire desktop, publish an individual or set of applications to our users. Or we can do single user desktops, either single user personal desktops where there is a permanent assignment between a user and their VM, or a single user pool desktop, which is kind of a VDI concept where users can log in, have a dedicated machine for the duration of the session, then log off, have that VM refreshed, and be put back into the pool for someone else to use next time they log in. So in our example, I'm going to create this as a multi-user pooled desktop. We can then select our Active Directory profile, Azure AD, Azure ADDS, whatever directory we happen to be using. I'll just choose my default, which is in the AD profile inside of my standard Windows Active Directory. We'll then choose our FSLogix profile. We can choose to turn it off if we wanted to, or choose a profile that's going to tell the system where to point FSLogix to, which Azure file share, which region, etc. So I'm going to choose my default profile. We're then going to give this a name. So let's do Trustack. And that's going to be a prefix that will have an automatic suffix added to it to make that a unique VM name in Azure, as well as the name of a computer object in our Active Directory. We can choose any network that's linked to our environment, and this could be any network in any region, in any Azure subscription, and even in other Azure clouds. Could be listed here as well. So you can see I have South Central US, I have UK South, East US. I'll choose this one, which happens to be in the North Central US. It will analyze how many IP addresses are available to make sure we have sufficient number of IPs to actually do this deployment. And then we go on to choose the desktop image that we're going to use to deploy this environment. And in my lab, you'll see I have a very long list of images. But the way this list breaks down is into these 4 sections. At the very top, we have what are called managed images. These are the ones you can create automatically, patch automatically, roll them out, etc. So these are managed images. We have all the Azure Marketplace images that Microsoft manages and updates on a monthly basis. So all the different versions of the OS, Server OS, Windows 10, Windows 11, multi-session, single session, with Office, without Office, etc., are all listed here. We have any custom images right here that may have been created in our Azure environment already. And we have Azure Compute Gallery images available in this list as well. So for our example, I'm going to choose Windows 11 Enterprise. Let's do multi-session generation for VM because I'm doing a multi-session user deployment up here. The next thing is that Nerdio Manager will automatically recommend the best possible VM family based on availability and cost and what's available in my subscription. So if you click on this list, you'll see there's going to be an ordered list of VM types. So in my case, I want a 4-core VM, and it's telling me that this D4AS V5 is not only the latest version, it's available in my region. You can see how many core quotas I have, and also how much it costs. And relative to this one, it's a couple of cents, in this case, cheaper on an hourly basis. So that's what I'm going to go with. I'm going to select a P10 operating system disk to give us the best performance, choose a resource group, give a name of users, or groups that are going to be assigned to this host pool. So these users will be able to log in just a few minutes, and I'm going to click OK. So what this is now doing, excuse me, is it's creating all of the necessary resources for the host pool as we specified. Now, the thing you'll notice is we specified the network and the image and the VM size and the disk, but the one thing we didn't say is how many VMs we actually wanted to create. And the reason for that is because the size of a host pool is dynamic. It's controlled by the autoscale engine, depending on the load on the system. So what you'll see immediately as soon as that host pool is created is the manage autoscale pages come up. We're going to turn autoscale on. We're going to change one value here just so I don't create any unnecessary VMs. We're going to change base capacity to 3 and click save. And as we're going through this page, these VMs are being provisioned and created for us in the background. So by the time we're done, they're going to be hopefully almost ready. So now let's see what you can actually configure on this page. So first of all, you'll see lots of options, but out of the box by default, it's ready to go, right? This is already a functional autoscale enabled host pool, but I'm going to show you what you can customize. On the top left, you have all the settings we've seen on the previous page where we created the host pool. One thing I want to draw your attention to is recall we selected the OS disk to be a premium SSD, and we have now the option to set the stopped OS disk to be something of a lower, cheaper tier. So I'm going to set it to standard HDD, which is going to automatically convert between premium and standard spinning media and solid state as the VM is powered on and off. On the right-hand side, you can see an estimated cost of our configuration based on the real-time Azure pricing API that tells us what the minimum and maximum cost of compute and storage will be. The actual cost is going to be somewhere in between these two extremes, and we'll measure and report on it after about a week to 2 weeks of auto-scale information. So once users start using the environment, it's actually going to project for you what the costs are likely to be for the remainder of the month. Now let's get into the actual configuration of a host pool. So the first thing we have to do is specify what's called a base host pool capacity. This tells the system how many VMs to pre-provision and have available in the host pool at all times. Now, it doesn't mean that they're all started and running all the time, but it means they all exist. So if I type in 3, that means I'll have 3 VMs that are going to be in my host pool, either on or off, will depend on the subsequent setting. Then we have something called minimum active host capacity. This tells the system how many out of these 3 must be on 24/7. So on the nights and weekends, as well as during business hours. And this could be anything from 0, if you want nothing to be on all the time, up to 3. In our example, we're going to use 1, which means one of the 3 machines is going to always be on, guaranteed. Then we have something called burst beyond base capacity. This is where the just-in-time provisioning comes in. If we specify 2 in here, that means that as long as the base capacity is sufficient to support the user load, these will never be created and you won't pay anything for them. But as soon as all 3 of these VMs are used up, then 2 more VMs can be created for a total of a maximum of 5 VMs. So we can have a maximum of 5 running VMs and a minimum of 1 running VM. And the number of actual VMs running is going to depend on the scaling logic. The scaling logic basically tells the system when to increase capacity and when to decrease it. And it could be based on different types of triggers. For example, it could be based on CPU, based on RAM, based on sessions, based on purely user-driven behavior, where the system turns a machine on when the user logs in and automatically turns it off when the user logs off, or any combination of these. So just for the purposes of this example, I'll leave the defaults in place and explain them. So imagine you have a utilization of 65% of the CPU for 5 minutes or longer. The system will then scale out, which means increase capacity 1 VM at a time. And then when the utilization falls below 30%, and let's say stays there for 15 minutes or longer, then it's going to start scaling in also 1 VM at a time as needed. And the way that process will work is when it's scaling out, it will first power on the base capacity VMs. And once all of these are used up, then it's going to build, if needed, more burst capacity, as long as the utilization remains above this threshold. And then once utilization drops, it's going to first remove and delete any burst capacity added earlier in the day. And then it's going to start powering off the base capacity until it either gets to 1 minimum capacity that we specified here, or when the utilization settles above 30% at the end of the day. Now, you may say, I don't want scaling in to happen until after business hours. So we got you on that. You can say until 6:30 p.m., don't do any scaling in. And when you are scaling in, you can set aggressiveness levels. You can say high aggressiveness, medium aggressiveness, low aggressiveness. So you can really customize how the scaling process works if you wanted to. Now, pre-staging is something really important because let's say you have users that are working Monday through Friday and they start work at 8 a.m. So instead of having to have the system respond to them logging in and power on that capacity reactively, we wanted to proactively build a certain amount of capacity. So let's say we know we're going to need 4 hosts first thing in the morning by 8 a.m. The system will calculate how long is it expected to get that many hosts ready to go and start a few minutes prior to 8, so that by 8 a.m., those VMs will be ready to go. So when users come in and they log in, they will get evenly distributed across those VMs, have a good user experience, and be up and running quickly. And then if users are not logging in during that day, maybe it's a holiday, like it was yesterday on a Monday, users don't log in, then an hour later, those VMs will get shut back down as they were before they were pre-staged. And then the final thing I want to show you on this page is the auto-heal self-healing capability. So imagine we have a host that is reporting that it's unavailable, or maybe it's reporting that it lost its domain trust relationship, or FSLogix isn't healthy, or any other type of unhealthy state. You can then tell the system, wait 5 minutes and then start fixing the problem. So what's the first step in fixing it? Well, the first thing I may want to do is restart the AVD agent. Maybe that will fix the problem. If not, then maybe I want to restart my VM altogether and see if that fixes the problem. If not, maybe I want to reinstall my AVD agent from the latest repository to the latest version. And then if that doesn't do it, then maybe I want to delete and recreate the VM automatically under the same name with the same IP address, same AD computer object, and get it back into operation without any admin involvement. And I can customize any of these tasks. Like if I have a custom script that I wrote that's unique to my environment because something gets out of sync and I need to force it, you can certainly do that and add that as what we call a scripted action to run as a recovery action in this page. So if we click on save and close, we're going to take all these settings and apply them to this new host pool that we created. So here's our new host pool. You can see here's our auto scale configuration right here. You'll recall we asked a base capacity of 3, but we currently have 0 hosts. Now, why do we have 0 hosts? Because this is a brand new host pool. We just created it. And as a result of us configuring 3 as our desired capacity and currently having 0, the system automatically begins adding these hosts into the environment. And if you want to see kind of what the process looks like, you can click on details, and this will give you a very detailed breakdown of every single step that it's taking, like what the VM configuration looks like, what the FSLogix configuration looks like. You can see it created the VM in the right region, in the right resource group. It joined it to my Active Directory domain. It installed my monitoring configuration. It's now installing FSLogix. It will go through the entire build process. And in a few more minutes, we'll have 3 VMs that will be ready to go inside of this host pool that users will be able to connect to, see their profile. If there's custom apps on the image, they'll be able to run the applications. In just a few minutes, we can have a host pool environment ready to go. and it's as easy as that. And this is just, you know, a tiny fraction of what's possible, but I hope it sort of demonstrates to you the ease and simplicity and how intuitive this environment is, at the same time being very powerful and configurable. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Russell to kind of walk us through some of the next steps. And I really appreciate you taking the time to learn more about AVD and Nerdio Manager.
Thanks, Vadim, for that. Undoubtedly, a lot covered there, right, in a short amount of time. And as you said, it's not tip of the iceberg, but it's nowhere near everything that Nerdio is capable of. So I'm sure everybody on the webinar has found that useful. I guess what's the call to action? There's only so much you can cover in just under an hour, right? So for those of you who are serious about making a leap towards an AVD solution or a W365 solution, and you wish to do so in a structured and cost-effective manner, reach out, give us a shout at Trustack, drop us an email. There's some details on the next slide. We have a simple and proven approach to handling and managing these projects. It's been refined over many years of in-house VDI projects and now cloud-based AVD projects. Everything we do is aligned and follows the Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework. So I'm conscious there's not much more that I can cover that Vadim hasn't already without looking at extra layers of technology, and we simply don't have time for that. So there's our contact details. Reach out to us if you are already running an AVD environment and you think you've taken it as far as you can in terms of optimization and automation with scripting in-house, etc. I guarantee there's more to be rinsed out of that cost-saving capability by using something like Nerdio. So get in touch, give us a shout. If you haven't already gone down that AVD route and you don't know where to start, you're looking at the planning and design, again, reach out and we'll get one of our pre-sales consultants involved in that call. Honest, straight, truthful advice. That's what you get from Trustack. So give us a shout. Just thank you for your time at this point. There's a lot of people still on that call. A lot of people have given up their time. So thank you very much. We appreciate it. Thank you, Vadim. Good to see you as always.
Thank you. Great to see you as well. I know we didn't get any questions during this webinar. I think I just allowed everyone to come off mute if you would like to and ask if there's any last minute questions. I'm happy to stay on a few extra minutes, but if not, thank you again for your attention and enjoy the rest of your day and have a great week.
If there's any questions afterwards, there may be. I think Rich said he might be sending out a form afterwards. People can log the questions there, submit the form. We'll get back to them in one way, shape, or form, I'm sure. Okay.
I've just popped
Thanks,
it in
everyone.
the chat, gents. I'm going to send that out to all the attendees via the email address they registered with. So feel free to give us any details you need from that.
Okay. Well, for those of you whose day's just beginning, have a great day. For those who's ending, have a good evening.
Thank you.
Take care, folks.
Thanks,